Millionaire sees pregnant ex-wife working in Starbucks while having dinner with new girlfriend. But his reaction: "Welcome, beautiful souls. Has your heart been waiting for today's tale? Drop your precious name below. Are you already part of our cherished family, or is this your first time discovering us? Subscribe, and let's embark on this magical journey together." Now, take a deep breath. Our story begins. The autumn breeze whispered secrets through Manhattan's towering skyscrapers as golden light painted the city in hues of amber and bronze. In the prestigious Morgan Gallery, nestled in the heart of the financial district, 20-year-old Audrey Williams stood before an enormous abstract canvas, her keen eyes scrutinizing every brushstroke. Her slender fingers, adorned with simple silver rings, graduation gifts from her parents, traced invisible lines in the air as she contemplated the placement of each piece in her upcoming exhibition. At just 20, Audrey had already accomplished what many seasoned curators twice her age could only dream of. Her meteoric rise in New York's cutthroat art scene wasn't just a testament to her talent. It was a revolution in the making. The daughter of dedicated school teachers from Brooklyn, Audrey had grown up surrounded by art books rather than actual masterpieces. Her childhood bedroom walls plastered with postcards from museums her family couldn't afford to visit. The setting sun streamed through the gallery's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. Audrey's reflection ghosted across the glass surfaces, a vision in a modest but elegant charcoal grey dress that she'd saved 3 months to purchase. Her natural hair was styled in intricate braids, each one representing hours of work she'd done herself that morning, refusing to conform to the sleek, straight styles that dominated the upper echelons of the art world. "The lighting needs to be adjusted 3 degrees to the left," she murmured to herself, making a note on her iPad. "And the Rothko-inspired piece should be moved to catch the morning light." Her voice trailed off as she sensed a presence behind her, the kind of presence that seemed to alter the very air in the room. "Fascinating choice," a deep voice remarked. "Its timber rich with authority and something else. Curiosity, perhaps?" Most curators would have placed the centerpiece on the north wall. Audrey turned, her heart skipping a beat, as she found herself face to face with Arlo Barnaby, the real estate mogul whose name graced half the buildings in the financial district. At 35, he cut an imposing figure in his bespoke Tom Ford suit, every detail from his perfectly knotted tie to his handmade Italian leather shoes screaming old money and power. "The north wall would have been the safe choice, Mr. Barnaby," she replied, her voice steady despite the sudden flutter in her stomach. "But art isn't about playing it safe. It's about challenging perspectives, making people see things differently." She gestured toward the massive canvas behind her. "From this angle, the piece captures both natural and artificial light throughout the day, creating a constantly evolving dialogue with the viewer." A smile played at the corners of Arlo's mouth, his steel-grey eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "You know who I am," he observed. "Everyone in New York knows who you are," Audrey responded, turning back to the artwork. "Your latest development project is transforming the skyline as we speak." "And yet you don't seem impressed," he challenged, stepping closer. The subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and exotic, wafted between them. "Should I be?" Audrey asked, raising an eyebrow. "Buildings come and go, Mr. Barnaby. But art?" She placed her hand on the frame of the nearest piece. "Art endures. It speaks to the soul of humanity across centuries." A genuine laugh escaped him, a sound that his business associates would have sworn was as rare as a solar eclipse. "Most people try to flatter me when they first meet me," he said, moving to stand beside her. "I'm not most people," Audrey replied simply, finally turning to meet his gaze fully. The electricity that passed between them in that moment was palpable, Like the charged air before a summer storm, Arlo's expression shifted, something softening in his usually guarded features. "No," he murmured, "you certainly aren't." His eyes travelled over her face, taking in every detail. The determined set of her jaw, the intelligence burning in her dark eyes, the quiet confidence in her posture. "Tell me, Miss Williams, Audrey Williams. Tell me, Ms. Williams, what made you choose curation? You're young, remarkably young for such a prestigious position." Audrey's lips curved into a smile that held both pride and a hint of defiance. "Art chose me, Mr. Barnaby. Growing up in Brooklyn, I didn't have access to galleries like this. My parents, both teachers, would bring home art books from the school library. I spent hours studying those pages, imagining what it would be like to stand before the real masterpieces." She walked to another piece, a stunning mixed-media creation that seemed to capture the essence of urban life. "When I finally got to visit my first real gallery, it was like coming home. I knew then that this was my calling, not just to appreciate art, but to help others see its power, its potential to transform perspectives." Arlo followed her, his interest visibly piqued. "And how did you make that dream a reality?" "The art world isn't known for being particularly welcoming to outsiders. I worked harder than everyone else," Audrey stated matter-of-factly. "Internships during high school, scholarships to study art history, networking at every gallery opening I could get into. When others went home at 5, I stayed until midnight, learning everything I could. When they saw barriers, I saw challenges to overcome." The passion in her voice was magnetic, drawing Arlo closer still. He'd met countless people in his years building his empire, politicians, celebrities, fellow billionaires, but none had captured his attention quite like this young woman who spoke about art with such conviction. "Your vision is extraordinary," he remarked, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone, "not just for the art, but for what it can mean to people. I'd love to hear more about your perspectives over dinner." Audrey paused, studying him carefully. In the fading daylight, his features seemed softer, more human than the cold portraits that graced business magazines. "Is that a professional request, Mr. Barnaby?" "Please call me Arlo," he said, a genuine smile transforming his face. "And no, it's not professional at all, unless you'd prefer it to be." The moment hung between them, fraught with possibility. Audrey was no fool. She knew the risks of mixing business with pleasure, especially in her position. But there was something in Arlo's expression, a sincerity that seemed to cut through his usual polished facade. "I don't mix business with pleasure, Arlo," she said finally, her voice firm. "So if this is about acquiring pieces for your collection or securing my curatorial services, I suggest we schedule a proper meeting during business hours." His smile widened, respect and admiration clear in his eyes. "Then let's leave business entirely out of it. Have dinner with me tomorrow night. No talk of art markets or gallery openings, just two people getting to know each other." Audrey felt her heart race, even as her mind urged caution. This was Arlo Barnaby, the man whose reputation for both business success and romantic conquests was legendary in New York's social circles. And yet, "One condition," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "We eat at my favorite place in Brooklyn. No five-star restaurants, no private clubs. If you want to know me, know my world first." Arlo's expression registered surprise, then genuine pleasure. "Deal," he said, extending his hand. When Audrey took it, the contact sent sparks shooting up her arm. "Though I should warn you, I haven't been to Brooklyn in years. I might stand out a bit." "That's the point," Audrey replied with a small smile. "Sometimes the best way to see things differently is to step outside your comfort zone. Isn't that what you do in business? Take calculated risks." "Touché, Miss Williams," he chuckled, reluctantly releasing her hand. "I have a feeling you're going to be an interesting risk indeed." As the last rays of sunlight painted the gallery in deep oranges and purples, neither of them could have known just how prophetic those words would prove to be. Their chance encounter, set against the backdrop of New York's glittering art scene, was about to set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love, power, and redemption. The autumn breeze continued to whisper through the canyon-like streets below, carrying with it the promises and perils of new beginnings. In the gathering dusk, two souls from vastly different worlds stood before a canvas of infinite possibilities, unaware that their own story was about to become the most compelling masterpiece of all. Chapter 2. Whirlwind Romance. The Brooklyn night hummed with an energy all its own as Audrey led Arlo through the narrow streets of her childhood neighborhood. Marie's Soul Food Kitchen, a humble establishment tucked between a bodega and a vintage record store, glowed like a beacon in the gathering darkness. The aroma of sweet potato pie and collard greens wafted through the air, drawing an appreciative smile from Arlo, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him all evening. "My father proposed to my mother here," Audrey shared, watching as Arlo took in the worn vinyl booths and vintage photos adorning the walls. "He was a substitute teacher then, saving every penny for a ring. She told him she'd rather have his love than a diamond." Her voice carried a hint of challenge, testing whether the billionaire before her could appreciate the wealth found in simplicity. Arlo's response surprised her. "They understood what truly matters," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers across the checkered tablecloth. "My own parents' marriage was a business merger disguised as love. All the wealth in the world couldn't make up for the coldness in our home. That evening marked the beginning of something neither of them could have anticipated. As they shared plates of Miss Marie's famous fried chicken and talked until closing time, the carefully constructed walls between their worlds began to crumble. Arlo spoke of lonely nights in boarding schools and the pressure to maintain the Barnaby legacy, while Audrey described her dreams of transforming the art world into a more inclusive space. Their worlds collided in the most unexpected ways over the weeks that followed. Arlo, the man who once bought a private island on a whim, found himself craving the authentic warmth of Brooklyn's street festivals and family-owned restaurants. Audrey, who had always viewed wealth with skepticism, discovered that behind Arlo's affluent facade beat the heart of a man desperate to create something real. One crisp morning, as October painted Central Park in brilliant shades of red and gold, Arlo surprised Audrey with a sunrise helicopter ride over Manhattan. But it wasn't the spectacular view that took her breath away. It was the tenderness in his eyes as he pointed out the building where he'd first learned to dream beyond his father's shadow. "I used to hide in the maintenance stairwell," he confessed, his fingers intertwined with hers. "It was the only place where I could escape the weight of expectations. I'd sketch buildings on old blueprints, imagining structures that would touch the sky but still feel like home." Audrey squeezed his hand, recognizing the lonely child beneath the powerful man. "And now you build them," she said softly. "Now I build them," he agreed, turning to face her fully. "But until I met you, I'd forgotten why I wanted to in the first place. You've awakened something in me, Audrey, something I thought died years ago." Their romance blazed across New York's social scene like a meteor, leaving whispers and speculation in its wake. The tabloids couldn't get enough of the unlikely pair, the billionaire real estate mogul and the young curator who had captured his heart. But while the papers focused on their apparent differences, those closest to them saw something profound blossoming. Arlo's transformation was particularly striking. The man known for his cutthroat business tactics and cold efficiency began showing up at small gallery openings in Brooklyn, engaging with emerging artists and actually listening to their stories. He donated millions to arts education programs in underserved communities, not for the publicity, but because he'd seen the world through Audrey's eyes and couldn't unsee it. Yet beneath the fairy tale romance, currents of tension swirled. Audrey's parents, Marcus and Gloria Williams, watched their daughter's whirlwind romance with growing concern. Over Sunday dinner in their modest Brooklyn home, they tried to voice their fears. "Baby girl," Gloria began, her hands busy braiding Audrey's hair just as she had done since childhood. "Love is beautiful, but it needs time to grow strong roots. You're so young." "Mom," Audrey interrupted, turning to face her mother. "Arlo's different from what you think. He's not just his money or his reputation." Marcus Williams set down his newspaper, his wise eyes studying his daughter. "We know you see something special in him, sweetheart, but men like Arlo Barnaby, they live in a different world, a world where everything and everyone has a price." But Audrey was convinced she knew better. How could she explain to her parents the way Arlo's mask slipped away when they were alone? The vulnerability in his voice when he spoke of his dreams, the gentle way he traced the lines of her face in quiet moments, as if memorizing a priceless work of art. Their courtship became the stuff of modern fairy tales. Private jets whisked them away on spontaneous adventures, breakfast in Paris, lunch in Rome, dinner in Venice. Yet it was the simple moments that Audrey treasured most. Arlo attempting to cook her grandmother's recipe for sweet potato pie, both of them laughing as smoke filled his penthouse kitchen. Quiet evenings spent in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, where he seemed more at peace than in any of his luxurious homes. December arrived in a swirl of snowflakes, and with it came a shift in their relationship. Arlo grew distracted, cancelling plans last minute and taking mysterious phone calls. Audrey's heart sank, fear creeping in that her parents' warnings might prove prophetic after all. Then, on a frost-kissed evening, Arlo asked her to meet him at the Morgan Gallery, the place where their story began. As Audrey entered, she gasped. The space had been transformed into a wonderland of twinkling lights and floating candles. Each wall displayed a photograph capturing a moment from their whirlwind romance. Their first dinner in Brooklyn, dancing in the rain in Paris, sharing gelato in Venice. In the center of it all stood Arlo, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "You once told me that art endures," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "that it speaks to the soul of humanity across centuries. Audrey, you are the masterpiece I never knew I was searching for. You've shown me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in moments of genuine connection." He dropped to one knee, presenting not a massive diamond as everyone might have expected, but a delicate vintage ring. "This belonged to my grandmother, the only person in my family who married for love rather than status. She told me to save it for someone who could see past the Barnaby name to the person beneath." His hands trembled slightly as he held it out to her. "Will you marry me, Audrey Williams? Will you help me create something real and beautiful in this world of illusions?" Time seemed to stand still as Audrey looked down at the man before her. Powerful yet vulnerable, wealthy yet searching for something money couldn't buy. In that moment, all the warnings and whispers faded away. She saw only the future they could build together, a bridge between their two worlds. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I'll marry you." The news of their engagement exploded across social media and society pages. New York's elite buzzed with speculation about the upcoming wedding, while Brooklyn celebrated one of their own, achieving a modern-day fairy tale. Yet amidst the chaos of wedding planning and media attention, Audrey and Arlo tried to keep sight of what mattered most, their connection. They decided on a December wedding, wanting to close the year with a celebration of their love. As Audrey flew to Paris for dress fittings and Arlo's team coordinated with top vendors, neither could have imagined how quickly their fairy tale would unravel. Like the winter frost creeping across window panes, shadows were already gathering at the edges of their perfect romance. If only Audrey had noticed the way Callista, a stunning model hired for Arlo's latest real estate campaign, looked at him during meetings. If only she'd paid attention to the late-night phone calls he claimed were about business. If only she'd recognized that sometimes fairy tales hide the darkest truths behind their glittering facades. But in that moment, standing in the transformed gallery where their story began, Audrey believed in love's power to bridge any divide. She believed in the man who knelt before her, promising forever. She believed in the possibility of their two worlds merging into something extraordinary. As snow began to fall outside the gallery windows, Arlo pulled her close, spinning her in a dance of joy and promise. Their laughter echoed through the space, a symphony of hope and dreams. Tomorrow would bring what it would, but tonight they were infinite. Chapter 3. A Dream. Wedding snow fell like stardust over Manhattan on the morning of December 15th, transforming the city into a crystalline wonderland. Inside the presidential suite of the plaza, Audrey Williams stood before a floor-length mirror, her heart drumming a symphony of joy and nervous anticipation. The custom Vera Wang gown hugged her curves before cascading into a magnificent train, hand-embroidered with thousands of microscopic crystals that caught the light with every breath. "You look like an angel, baby girl," Gloria Williams whispered, tears streaming down her face as she adjusted her daughter's veil. The delicate lace had been carefully preserved from Gloria's own wedding day, a touching bridge between past and present. "But are you sure about all this?" She gestured vaguely at the opulence surrounding them. The champagne flowing like water, the army of stylists, the diamond-encrusted shoes that cost more than a year's salary. Audrey caught her mother's reflection in the mirror, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. The wedding had snowballed from their original vision of an intimate celebration into a society spectacle that would grace the covers of magazines worldwide. The guest list had swelled to 300 of New York's most influential figures, many of whom Audrey had never met. "I'm marrying the man, Mom, not the circus," Audrey replied softly, turning to embrace her mother. The scent of Gloria's familiar jasmine perfume, the same $15 bottle she'd worn for 20 years, scented her amid the chaos. "Arlo wanted to give me a fairy tale. Who am I to deny him that joy?" A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Audrey's best friend and maid of honor, Maya Chen, burst in, her burgundy bridesmaid dress swirling around her legs. "The photographers are ready for the getting ready shots, and oh my God, Audrey!" She stopped short, her hands flying to her mouth. "You look absolutely breathtaking." The next hour passed in a blur of camera flashes and carefully orchestrated moments. Audrey's bridesmaids, a rainbow of beautiful women from different walks of her life, surrounded her with love and laughter. Yet there was an undercurrent of tension in the room. The subtle looks exchanged when another elaborate gift arrived from one of Arlo's business associates. The whispered conversations that stopped when Audrey drew near. In his own suite across the hotel, Arlo Barnaby stood at the window, Manhattan spread before him like a kingdom awaiting its king. His best man, Marcus Davidson, watched him with growing concern. "It's not too late, you know," Marcus said quietly, adjusting his bow tie. "If you're having second thoughts." Arlo's reflection smirked in the window. "Cold feet, Marcus? That's not very best man-like of you." "Just looking out for you, old friend. This isn't like your usual relationships." Marcus chose his words carefully. "Audrey's different. She's pure," Arlo finished, finally turning from the window. Something unreadable flickered across his face. "She sees the world in colors I forgot existed. When I'm with her, I almost believe I could be the man she thinks I am." Before Marcus could respond, Arlo's phone buzzed. A text message flashed across the screen from Callista. Marcus caught a glimpse of the words before Arlo quickly deleted it, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. The great bells of St. Patrick's Cathedral began their solemn toll at exactly noon. Outside, crowds of onlookers gathered behind police barricades, eager to catch a glimpse of the society wedding of the year. Inside, the massive space had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Thousands of white orchids and crystalline branches created an enchanted forest effect, while hundreds of candles cast a warm, ethereal glow over the assembled guests. Audrey stood in the cathedral's antechamber, her father, Marcus Williams, beside her. His hands trembled slightly as he took in his daughter's radiant beauty. "You know," he said softly, "when you were little, you used to say you'd get married in the community garden where you first fell in love with art." His voice caught. "Look at you now, baby girl, about to marry a billionaire in the biggest church in New York." "Daddy," Audrey turned to him, suddenly feeling like that little girl again. "Tell me I'm doing the right thing." Marcus studied his daughter's face, seeing beneath the perfect makeup to the uncertain young woman beneath. "Only you can answer that, sweetheart. But know this, whatever happens, your mother and I will always be here. Our love doesn't come with conditions or price tags." The wedding march began, its majestic notes soaring to the cathedral's vaulted ceiling. 300 guests rose as one, turning to watch as the massive doors swung open. Audrey took her first step down the aisle, her father's arm steady beneath her hand. The scene was magnificent beyond anything she could have imagined as a little girl in Brooklyn. Rose petals carpeted her path, while gossamer ribbons caught the light streaming through the stained glass windows. Each pew held New York's elite, fashion designers, real estate moguls, politicians, celebrities, all standing in witness to this modern fairy tale. And there, at the altar, stood Arlo. His face softened with something that looked like wonder as she approached, though somewhere in the depths of his steel-grey eyes, a shadow lurked. Audrey was too lost in the moment to notice how his gaze flickered briefly to the left, where Callista sat among the guests, her perfect features schooled into polite attention. The ceremony itself was a masterpiece of timing and tradition. The Archbishop's words echoed through the vast space as Arlo and Audrey exchanged their vows. His voice was steady, confident, the voice of a man who had closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. Hers trembled with emotion as she promised to love him for better or worse, for richer or poorer. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Archbishop declared. As Arlo drew Audrey in for their first kiss as a married couple, the cathedral erupted in applause. Rose petals rained down from the balconies, and the choir burst into a triumphant hymn. The reception at the plaza's grand ballroom was an explosion of luxury that would be talked about for years to come. Crystal chandeliers cast their warm glow over tables draped in hand-embroidered silk, each centerpiece a masterpiece of white orchids and diamonds. A 40-piece orchestra played as New York's elite dined on gold-leafed delicacies and sipped champagne that cost more per bottle than most, people's monthly rent. During their first dance, Arlo held Audrey close as they swayed to a classic love song. "Are you happy, my love?" he murmured in her ear. "Deliriously," she whispered back, though something in her heart flickered, a tiny warning light she couldn't quite identify. Maybe it was the way his phone kept buzzing in his pocket, or how his eyes seemed to scan the crowd more than focus on her. As the night wore on, the celebration became increasingly elaborate. Fireworks exploded over Central Park, synchronized to music. A surprise performance by one of the world's biggest pop stars had the crowd roaring. Through it all, Audrey found herself seeking quiet moments to ground herself. A quick embrace with her mother, a laugh with Maya, a dance with her father. Near midnight, she slipped away to the powder room, needing a moment alone. In the gilded mirror, She studied her reflection, the designer gown, the flawless makeup, the diamonds dripping from her ears. Was this really her? The girl from Brooklyn who once thought a trip to the Met was the height of luxury? The door opened and Callista emerged from a stall, their eyes meeting in the mirror. The model's smile was perfect, practiced, yet something in it made Audrey's skin crawl. "Beautiful wedding," Callista said smoothly, touching up her already flawless lipstick. "Arlo certainly knows how to put on a show, doesn't he?" Before Audrey could respond, Callista was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her exotic perfume and an uneasy feeling in the pit of Audrey's stomach. The celebration continued into the early hours of the morning. As the last guests departed and the orchestra played their final notes, Arlo swept Audrey into his arms. "Ready to begin our happily ever after, Mrs. Barnaby?" She smiled up at him, pushing away her doubts. After all, this was her fairy tale come true. How could anything go wrong? But fairy tales, as Audrey would soon learn, often hide dark truths beneath their glittering surface. And sometimes the highest towers have the furthest to fall. Chapter 4. Paradise Lost. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Barnaby penthouse, casting golden shadows across the Italian marble floors. Audrey stood in her private art studio, Arlo's wedding gift to her, holding a small white stick that would change everything. 2 pink lines, clear, definitive, a new life growing within her. Her hands trembled as she touched her still flat stomach, joy and anxiety warring in her heart. 3 months into their marriage, and already their love had created something miraculous. She imagined Arlo's face when she told him. Would his steel-grey eyes soften with wonder? Would he pull her close, whisper promises of forever against her hair? But fate had other plans for that pristine morning. As Audrey moved to dispose of the pregnancy test, her elbow knocked against Arlo's custom-made phone dock. The screen lit up with a notification that shattered her world. "Callista, last night was incredible. I miss you already. When can you get rid of her?" Time stopped. The pregnancy test clattered to the floor. With shaking fingers, Audrey picked up the phone. She didn't want to look, God, how she didn't want to look, but her thumb moved of its own accord, opening the message thread. What she found destroyed every beautiful lie she'd believed about their fairy tale romance. Hundreds of messages, photos, hotel reservations. Their affair hadn't started after the wedding. It had been going on since before the proposal. Every business trip, every late-night meeting, every cancelled dinner date. While she'd been planning their wedding, choosing flowers and tasting cakes, Arlo had been with Callista. "No," Audrey whispered, her voice breaking. "No, no, no." The sound of the penthouse door opening echoed through the vast space. Arlo's footsteps, familiar as her own heartbeat, approached the studio. Audrey couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there holding his phone like a live grenade. "Darling," Arlo called out, "are you home? I thought we could have lunch at that new—" His voice died as he entered the studio and saw her face. His eyes dropped to the phone in her hand, and something cold and terrible replaced his usual charm. "So," he said quietly, "you've been snooping through my private messages?" The casual cruelty of his deflection struck Audrey like a physical blow. "Snooping?" she whispered. "I accidentally saw a message when your phone lit up. But please tell me how this is my fault. Tell me how I'm wrong for discovering that my husband of 3 months, has been cheating on me since before we were even engaged." "Don't be dramatic, Audrey." Arlo's voice took on the condescending tone he used with difficult business associates. "You're young, naive. Did you really think a man in my position would be satisfied with— well, look at you." Each word was a dagger, but Audrey stood her ground. "Look at me. You mean the woman you claimed to love? The woman you married in front of God and 300 of your closest friends? The woman who is carrying your child? For a moment, something flickered in Arlo's eyes, surprise, perhaps even a flash of emotion, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold calculation. "A child?" He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "How convenient. Let me guess. You saw the messages and suddenly you're pregnant? Really, Audrey, I expected better from you." She held up the pregnancy test, her hand steady despite the trembling in her heart. "I found out this morning. I was going to surprise you. I thought you'd be happy." "Happy?" Arlo's face twisted into something ugly. "Happy about being trapped by a gold digger from Brooklyn? Please, I built an empire. I have a legacy to protect. Did you really think I'd let some charity case from the wrong side of the tracks raise a Barnaby heir?" The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Audrey staggered back, her free hand protectively covering her stomach. "Charity case? Is that what I was to you? Just another acquisition? Another property to add to your portfolio?" "Oh, darling." Arlo's smile was razor-sharp. "You were a novel experience. The talented young curator from the streets, so pure, so idealistic, and I'll admit you played your part beautifully. The devoted wife, the artistic soul who could see past my walls. It was entertaining for a while. While you were sleeping with Callista behind my back," Audrey's voice grew stronger, anger beginning to replace the shock. "While you made me believe in fairy tales, you were writing a horror story. Callista understands how the world really works." Arlo moved to his private bar, pouring himself a scotch, as if they were discussing the weather. "She knows her place, accepts the arrangement for what it is. You, my dear, were never meant to be permanent. Though I must say, the pregnancy trick, that's beneath even you." Something inside Audrey snapped. 3 months of marriage, a lifetime of dreams, all built on lies. She grabbed the nearest object, a priceless Ming vase, and hurled it at the wall beside his head. It shattered spectacularly, pieces of centuries-old porcelain raining down like tears. "Get out," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Get out of my studio." Arlo's eyes darkened. "Your studio?" "Nothing in this penthouse is yours, Audrey. Or did you forget about the prenup you so trustingly signed? Everything here belongs to me, including you, at least until my lawyers finish drawing up the divorce papers." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, gripping her arm with bruising force. "You want to play hardball? Fine, pack your things. You have 1 hour. After that, security will escort you out. And don't bother trying to claim the baby is mine. No court will believe a gold digger's word over mine." "Let go of me!" Audrey's voice shook, but her eyes blazed with defiance. "You may own this penthouse, Arlo, but you never owned me. And this baby? This baby will never know your name." He released her with a mocking bow. 1 hour, Audrey. Tick-tock. As he strode from the studio, Audrey sank to the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her dreams. Tears streamed down her face as she cradled her stomach, whispering promises to the tiny life within. "We'll be okay," she murmured. "We don't need him. We don't need any of this." But as she looked around the studio, at the art supplies he'd bought her, the expensive furnishings, the view of Manhattan she'd thought she'd wake up to forever, reality crashed down like a tidal wave. She was 20 years old, pregnant, and about to be homeless. Her family had warned her, and she hadn't listened. Her pride wouldn't let her go back to them now. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. The prenup had been clear. Anything she earned during the marriage belonged to Arlo. Her savings from before. A pittance compared to the cost of living in New York. Exactly 59 minutes later, Audrey Williams walked out of the Barnaby penthouse with a single suitcase containing her pre-marriage clothes, her mother's locket, and the shattered remains of her dreams. As the private elevator descended, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished doors. tears streaking her mascara, her designer dress wrinkled, her world collapsing. But deep within her chest, beneath the pain and humiliation, a spark of determination flickered to life. Arlo Barnaby had underestimated her once. She would make damn sure he never made that mistake again. Chapter 5. The Descent. Rising from rock bottom. The February wind cut through Audrey's thin coat like knives as she hurried down the crowded Manhattan streets, her work apron stuffed hastily into her oversized bag. 4 months had passed since her world imploded, and each day brought new lessons in survival. The prestigious art galleries that had once welcomed her now turned cold shoulders. Arlo's influence reached far and deep into New York's cultural scene. Today's shift at Starbucks had been particularly grueling. Her feet ached, her back screamed in protest, and her growing baby bump made the standard issue apron increasingly uncomfortable. But it was the whispers that hurt the most, the ones that followed her like shadows. "Isn't that Arlo Barnaby's ex? I heard she tried to trap him with a fake pregnancy. From curator to barista, how the mighty have fallen." Audrey kept her head high, though. Each whisper, each sidelong glance, each moment of humiliation only fueled the fire burning in her heart. She had $487 in her bank account, a tiny studio apartment in Queens that barely fit a bed, and a baby growing inside her who deserved better than this. The subway ride home was her thinking time. As the train rattled through dark tunnels, Audrey pulled out her worn notebook, her lifeline. Inside, alongside prenatal appointment reminders and budget calculations, she'd begun sketching plans, not just for survival, but for resurrection. "They think this is my ending," she whispered to her bump, a habit she'd developed over the lonely months. "But baby, they don't know your mama. This is just our beginning." Her tiny apartment welcomed her with familiar shadows. The space was sparse. She'd sold most of her possessions to cover the security deposit, but it was hers. No golden handcuffs, no strings attached. On the wall, she'd created a vision board from magazine clippings and post-it notes. At its center, a photo of an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn she'd discovered during one of her long walks. The image represented more than just a building. It was possibility, hope, a dream taking shape in the darkness. A knock at her door startled her from her reverie. Opening it revealed Maya, her former maid of honor, carrying takeout and determination on her face. "No arguments," Maya declared, pushing past her. "You're eating proper food tonight, and we're strategizing." Maya was one of the few who'd stood by her after the fall. As they sat cross-legged on Audrey's mattress, she couldn't afford a bed frame yet. Maya pulled out her laptop. "So, I've been doing research," she began, between bites of pad thai. "Did you know that 60% of galleries in New York are run by men over 50? And less than 15% showcase artists of color as their primary exhibits?" Audrey raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What are you getting at?" "You've always talked about democratizing art, making it accessible to everyone. What if—" Maya's eyes sparkled with excitement. "What if this is your chance? Not just to bounce back, but to revolutionize the entire scene." The idea took root in Audrey's mind, expanding like a flower reaching for sunlight. She thought of her childhood in Brooklyn, of all the talented artists who never got their shot because they didn't fit the establishment's mold. "The warehouse," she breathed. "It could be a gallery? A community art space? Both?" Maya was practically bouncing. "Audrey, you have the vision, the expertise, and something none of those stuffy Manhattan galleries have, authenticity." But reality crashed back like a cold wave. "And zero capital, a ruined reputation, and a baby on the way," Audrey added bitterly. Maya grabbed her hands. "You have something more valuable, a story. The art world loves nothing more than a phoenix rising from the ashes. Plus," she grinned mischievously, "I may have some connections from my investment banking days who'd love to stick it to Arlo Barnaby." For the first time in months, Audrey felt hope flutter in her chest. She moved to her vision board, adding a new post-it, Phoenix Gallery, where art meets revolution. "It won't be easy," she murmured, one hand on her growing bump. "The road back up is steeper than the fall down." "The best revenge isn't just success," Maya replied, her voice fierce with loyalty. "It's success that changes the game entirely." That night, after Maya left, Audrey couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, watching the city lights twinkle like distant stars. In the reflection of the glass, she saw not just herself, but generations of women who'd been knocked down and rose stronger. She opened her notebook to a fresh page and began to write, "Dear baby, tonight I promise you this. Our story won't be one of victimhood, but of victory. Your mother fell from a golden tower, yes, but she'll build something far more valuable, a legacy of authenticity, creativity, and resilience. They think I'm finished? I'm just getting started. Love, Mama." As if in response, the baby kicked, strong and determined, just like its mother. Audrey smiled, tears mixing with newfound determination. Tomorrow, she'd start researching small business loans. She'd reach out to her old art school network. She'd begin laying the foundation for something revolutionary. But first, she had another shift at Starbucks, another day of whispers and sidelong glances, another day of swallowing her pride as she served lattes to people who used to regard her as a peer. Yet now, each moment of humiliation would serve a purpose. Each sneer, each whisper, each cold shoulder would become another brick in the foundation of her resurrection. Arlo Barnaby had taught her a brutal lesson about power and privilege, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one with nothing left to lose. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. When Worlds Collide. The evening sun cast long shadows through the windows of Manhattan's most exclusive Starbucks, where crystal chandeliers hung above imported marble countertops. Audrey's hands trembled slightly as she prepared another oat milk latte, her 6th month of pregnancy making even simple tasks challenging. The baby kicked, as if sensing her exhaustion, and she pressed a gentle hand to her swollen belly. "Hold on, little one," she whispered. "Just 2 more hours until—" The distinctive click of Louboutin heels on marble stopped her heart. She didn't need to look up. The sudden hush falling over the cafe told her everything. Arlo Barnaby had just walked in, and he wasn't alone. Callista's laugh, musical, practiced, perfect, cut through the silence like a knife. They made their way to the counter, a picture-perfect couple straight from the pages of Vogue. Arlo wore a bespoke Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Audrey's annual salary, while Callista draped herself over his arm in a red dress that screamed new money and old intentions. "Well, well," Callista's voice dripped with false sweetness. "Look who it is, darling, your little social experiment." Audrey lifted her chin, meeting their gazes with a dignity that surprised even her. "Welcome to Starbucks. What can I get you today?" Arlo's steel-grey eyes swept over her, taking in the standard-issue apron stretched over her pregnant belly, the shadows under her eyes, the fading calluses on her once-manicured hands. Something flickered in his expression. Was it guilt? Regret? But Callista spoke before he could. "2 venti iced Americanos," she purred, then paused dramatically. "Oh, and some advice. They have excellent adoption agencies in the city, for when the reality of single motherhood becomes too overwhelming." The cafe had gone deadly quiet. Every customer, every barista seemed to hold their breath. Audrey's hands clenched into fists beneath the counter, her nails leaving crescent moons in her palms. "That will be $12.50, she said steadily, each word a small victory over the scream building in her throat. Arlo pulled out his platinum card, the same one he'd once used to buy her a gallery in Paris on a whim. As he handed it over, their fingers brushed accidentally. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm, memories of happier times threatening to break her carefully constructed walls. "Audrey," he began, his voice lower, meant only for her. Your drinks will be ready at the end of the counter," she cut him off, turning away to hide the tears threatening to fall. But Callista wasn't finished. "You know, Arlo and I were just discussing baby names. For the future, of course." She placed a perfectly manicured hand on her flat stomach. "We think Alexandra for a girl, after his grandmother, the one who gave him that gorgeous vintage ring. The same ring he'd used to propose to Audrey, the one he'd claimed was meant for someone who could see past the Barnaby name." Something snapped inside her. The iced Americanos went flying, drenching Callista's $1,000 dress and Arlo's custom suit. The cafe erupted in gasps and hastily raised phones, social media vultures sensing viral content. "How dare you!" Callista shrieked, but Audrey's voice, when it came, silenced everyone. "You want to talk about names?" Her words rang through the stunned silence. "Let's talk about names. Gold digger, charity case, social experiment. I've heard them all. But here's one you forgot. Survivor." She untied her apron with shaking hands. "I may be serving coffee instead of curating galleries, but at least I earn my way honestly. Can you say the same, Callista? How many other engaged men have you comforted while climbing the social ladder?" Callista's perfect face contorted with rage. "Security! This woman is clearly unstable." "No need," Audrey said quietly, placing her apron on the counter. "I quit." She walked around the counter, pregnancy making her movements deliberate, powerful. Standing before them, she no longer felt small. "You took everything from me," she addressed Arlo directly. "My career, my reputation, my dreams. You tried to break me. But here's what you didn't count on. Everything you threw away. I'm gathering it up, piece by piece, and I'm building something stronger than your glass towers and empty promises." The baby kicked again, harder this time. Audrey smiled, her first genuine smile in months. This child. They won't carry the Barnaby name. They'll carry something far more valuable, resilience, the knowledge that their mother faced the worst and rose anyway. Phones recorded every word as she turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Oh, and Callista, that ring you're so proud of, check the inscription. To my dearest Margaret, true love sees with the heart. Funny how neither of you seem to do much seeing at all." The door chimed as she stepped into the evening air, leaving chaos in her wake. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone, dialing Maya's number. "It happened," she said simply when her friend answered. "I just burned my last bridge." Maya's response was immediate. "Good. Now we can start building our own." Tears finally fell as Audrey walked away from her last connection to her old life. But they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of release, of rebirth. Behind her, through the cafe windows, she could see Arlo watching her go. For the first time since their marriage crumbled, she didn't look back. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point. Rise of the Phoenix. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai Hospital's emergency room cast a harsh glow over Audrey's tear-stained face as nurses rushed around her. The events at Starbucks had triggered early contractions, a warning sign her body couldn't ignore. As she lay on the sterile hospital bed, one hand protectively cradling her 7-month bump, the magnitude of her situation crashed over her like a tidal wave. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high," Dr. Sarah Chen explained, her kind eyes showing concern behind her professional demeanor. "You need complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks. No work, no stress, no exceptions." Audrey laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the hospital walls. "No work? No stress? Doctor, I just quit my only source of income in the most spectacular way possible. Videos of me drenching my ex-husband and his mistress in coffee are probably going viral as we speak. Dr. Chen sat on the edge of the bed, dropping her clinical facade for a moment. I saw those videos, actually. They're trending on Twitter. A Barista Barnaby and Justice for Audrey are both gaining traction. Through her tears, Audrey couldn't help but smile. Great, I'm a hashtag now. You're more than that, the doctor said firmly. You're a symbol. Do you know how many women have shared similar stories of powerful men using their influence to silence them? You stood up, Audrey. You fought back. But fighting back came with consequences. As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a message from her former manager at Starbucks. Corporate HR wants to speak with you. Possible legal action pending. The monitor beside her bed beeped as her heart rate spiked. Dr. Chen quickly intervened, taking the phone from her trembling hands. No more of this tonight. You need rest. As the doctor left, Maya burst into the room, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum floor. One look at her friend's face told Audrey everything. This was bigger than she'd imagined. First things first, Maya declared, pulling up a chair. You're staying with me, no arguments. My spare room is already set up. Maya, I can't. You can and you will. Maya's tone left no room for discussion. But that's not all. The videos, they've exploded. Every major news outlet wants your story. Women's rights organizations are reaching out, and... She paused dramatically. 3 major publishing houses want to discuss a book deal. Audrey's head spun. A book deal? About what? About everything. Your rise in the art world, the whirlwind romance, the betrayal, and most importantly, what comes next. Maya's eyes sparkled with excitement. This is it, Audrey. This is your platform. But doubt crept in like a shadow. What comes next? Maya, I'm about to be a single mother with no job, possible legal troubles, and a powerful ex-husband who'd love to see me fail. What could I possibly write about? Write about that, a new voice said from the doorway. They looked up to see Dr. Chen returning with discharge papers. Write about the fear, the uncertainty, the moments when giving up seems easier than going on. Then write about why you don't. The doctor handed Audrey a business card. My sister is a civil rights attorney. She specializes in cases involving workplace discrimination and power imbalances. Call her. As Dr. Chen left, Audrey stared at the card in her hands. Memories flooded her mind. The young artists she'd championed at her gallery, the dreams she'd had of making art accessible to everyone, the fire that had burned in her heart before Arlo's world of privilege and power had dimmed it. Maya, she said slowly, an idea taking shape. Remember that warehouse in Brooklyn? The one from your vision board? What about it? What if... Audrey sat up straighter, energy coursing through her despite her exhaustion. What if we turned it into more than just a gallery? What if we created a space for all the voices the art world tries to silence? A place where talent matters more than connections, where creativity isn't measured by the size of your bank account. Maya's eyes widened as she caught on. A community art center, with studios for emerging artists, exhibition spaces, educational programs. And a coffee shop, Audrey added with a slight smile, one that treats its employees with respect and dignity. For the first time in months, excitement replaced fear in her chest. She grabbed her notebook from her bag, beginning to sketch out ideas. We could partner with schools in underserved communities, offer scholarships, create mentorship programs. Slow down, Maya laughed, but her eyes shone with approval. You're supposed to be resting, remember? But Audrey couldn't rest. Not now. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, as if encouraging her forward. This isn't just about revenge anymore, Maya. It's about revolution. About taking everything they tried to use to break me and turning it into something beautiful. She thought of Arlo's face in the cafe, of Callista's perfect sneer, of all the whispers and judgments she'd endured. They thought they were writing my ending, but they just wrote my beginning. Maya squeezed her hand. Now that sounds like a book worth reading. As night fell over Manhattan, Audrey lay in her hospital bed, one hand on her belly, the other clutching her notebook. Ideas flowed faster than she could write them down. Floor plans, program outlines, potential partnerships. But more than that, she wrote her manifesto. To my child, they say rock bottom is where you discover what you're made of. Tonight, in a hospital room after the worst and best day of my new life, I discovered something important. We are made of stardust and steel, of dreams that refuse to die, of courage that burns brightest in the dark. Your father tried to erase me from his world, but he forgot something crucial. Sometimes the most powerful art comes from the deepest pain. We're going to build something extraordinary, you and I. A place where creativity knows no boundaries, where talent isn't measured in dollars, where every voice deserves to be heard. They call me number Barista Barnaby now, mocking my fall from grace. But what they don't understand is this. Every great revolution starts with someone who has nothing left to lose. Welcome to the revolution, little one. Love, Mama. The monitor beeped steadily beside her, a rhythm like a heartbeat, like determination, like hope. Outside her window, Manhattan's lights twinkled like stars, each one a promise of possibility. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal battles, financial struggles, the constant weight of expectation. But tonight, in this quiet room, Audrey Williams began to rise. Chapter 8. Justice Awakens. The First Battle. The marble corridors of New York Supreme Court echoed with whispers as Audrey Williams walked through the security checkpoint, her 8-month pregnant belly leading the way. Heads turned, phones discreetly captured photos, and social media buzzed with updates. Barista Barnaby was about to face off against one of the most powerful men in Manhattan. Maya walked beside her, carrying a briefcase full of evidence they'd spent weeks gathering. Behind them strode Patricia Chen, sister of Dr. Chen and now Audrey's attorney. Her reputation for taking down corporate giants preceding her like a war cry. "Remember," Patricia whispered as they approached the courtroom, "he expects you to be broken. Let him keep thinking that, right until we go for the jugular." The courtroom doors opened to reveal a scene straight from Audrey's nightmares. Arlo sat at the defendant's table, surrounded by a small army of lawyers in suits that probably cost more than her yearly rent. Callista perched in the front row, playing the role of supportive girlfriend to perfection. But something had changed in the month since the Starbucks confrontation. As Audrey took her seat, she felt not fear, but a calm certainty. Her hand rested on her bump, drawing strength from the tiny life within. Judge Maria Rodriguez entered, her reputation for championing women's rights making her presence both a blessing and a curse. No one could accuse her of bias without facing her legendary wit. "Your Honor," Arlo's lead attorney began, his voice dripping with rehearsed concern, "this case is nothing more than a desperate attempt by Ms. Williams to extort money from my client. The prenuptial agreement she willing signed was signed under duress." Patricia cut in, her voice sharp as a blade, "and more importantly, it's invalid due to Mr. Barnaby's fraudulent behavior during the marriage." Arlo's mask of indifference cracked. "Slightly," Patricia continued, pulling out a thick folder. "We have evidence of systematic discrimination, emotional abuse, and a calculated campaign to destroy my client's professional reputation. But first," she turned to Arlo, "Mr. Barnaby, would you please explain to the court why you fired every gallery director who offered Mrs. Barnaby employment after your separation?" The courtroom held its breath. Arlo's attorney jumped up. "Objection! Speculation!" "Overruled!" Judge Rodriguez's voice cracked like a whip. "Answer the question, Mr. Barnaby." Arlo straightened his tie, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. I merely express concerns about certain individuals' professional judgment. As a major patron of the arts, as a vindictive ex-husband, Patricia corrected, producing emails that made Arlo's smirk fade. Your Honor, I present Exhibit A, correspondence between Mr. Barnaby and the directors of 17 major galleries, threatening to withdraw funding if they hired my client. The evidence mounted like a tidal wave. Emails, phone records, witness statements from gallery employees who'd been pressured to blacklist Audrey. With each revelation, Arlo's composed facade cracked further. Then came the moment that would later be described as legendary in legal circles. Mrs. Barnaby, Judge Rodriguez addressed Audrey directly. Would you like to make a statement to the court? Audrey stood slowly, one hand supporting her back, the other protectively cradling her bump. The courtroom fell silent. Your Honor, I'm not here just for myself. Her voice, clear and strong, carried to every corner. I'm here for every woman who's been told her dreams are too big, her voice too loud, her existence too inconvenient. She turned to face Arlo directly. You didn't just try to break me. You tried to erase me, to turn me into a cautionary tale about knowing my place. A smile, genuine and fierce, transformed her face. But here's what you never understood. My place isn't in your shadow, it's in the light I create for myself. Judge Rodriguez leaned forward, intrigued. And what light is that, Mrs. Barnaby? Williams, Audrey corrected gently. My name is Audrey Williams, and I'm building something that can't be bought or bullied into submission. A community art center in Brooklyn focused on amplifying voices that the established art world tries to silence. Voices like mine. She pulled out architectural plans, spreading them on the evidence table. Every attempt to destroy me has only shown me what needs to be fixed in the system. Every door you slammed taught me where to build new ones. The judge studied the plans with interest. This is ambitious. It's necessary, Audrey replied. And it's already begun. We have support from community leaders, pledges from ethical investors, and a waiting list of artists eager to be part of something authentic. Arlo's laugh cut through the moment. How touching. The barista wants to play patron of the arts. Tell me, how do you plan to fund this little project? Tips from serving lattes. The question hung in the air like a challenge, but before Audrey could respond, the courtroom doors burst open. Eleanor Blackwood, the legendary art collector known for championing female artists, strode in. Through people like me, Mr. Barnaby. Her British accent cut like crystal. People who recognize that true art doesn't come from privilege, but from passion. She approached the bench, her presence commanding attention. Your Honor, I'd like to submit myself as a witness, not just to Mr. Barnaby's attempts to destroy this remarkable young woman's career, but to the incredible resilience she's shown in response. Judge Rodriguez's eyes sparkled. Accepted. And Mrs. Barnaby, forgive me, Ms. Williams, I believe we've heard enough to make some preliminary rulings. What followed would be discussed in law schools for years to come. The judge systematically dismantled every barrier Arlo had erected, ordered immediate cessation of all interference with Audrey's professional activities, and set damages that made even his team of lawyers blanch. But it was her closing statement that made headlines. Mr. Barnaby, you attempted to use your wealth and influence to silence a voice you found inconvenient. Instead, you've amplified it. Sometimes the most powerful art comes from the deepest pain. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. As cameras flashed and reporters rushed to file their stories, Audrey felt tears rolling down her cheeks, not of sorrow or relief, but of fierce joy. The baby kicked, strong and determined, as if celebrating with her. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor Blackwood took Audrey's arm. "Now then, dear, shall we discuss the real work of revolution? I believe you have a warehouse to renovate." Audrey caught Arlo watching her from the courthouse steps, his empire of control crumbling around him. For the first time she saw him, clearly, not as the powerful man who had tried to break her, but as someone who had never understood the true meaning of strength. Maya squeezed her hand. Ready to build something beautiful? Audrey smiled, feeling the future kick inside her. Ready to build something revolutionary. Chapter 9. The Truth Unveiled. Empire of Cards. The autumn sun painted Brooklyn's industrial district in shades of gold and promise as Audrey stood before the warehouse that would become her legacy. 8 months pregnant now, she wore her condition like a crown, her hand resting protectively over the life within as construction crews transformed the space around her. The sound of renovation echoed through the cavernous interior, not just rebuilding a building, but reconstructing a dream. Eleanor Blackwood's heels clicked against the concrete floor as she approached, her silver hair catching the light streaming through the newly installed skylights. "The contractors say we're ahead of schedule," she announced, her British accent crisp with satisfaction. "But darling, we've received some interesting information you need to see." Maya emerged from what would soon be the community gallery space, laptop in hand. The expression on her face made Audrey's heart skip a beat. "Remember those deep background checks we ran on Arlo's business dealings?" Maya's voice trembled with barely contained excitement. "Well, we found something big." They gathered around a makeshift desk, 3 women about to shake the foundations of Manhattan's elite. Maya opened her laptop, revealing documents that would change everything. "Arlo's empire isn't just built on real estate," she explained, pulling up spreadsheet after spreadsheet. "It's built on systematic discrimination and artistic exploitation. He's been buying up galleries, forcing out minority artists, and artificially inflating the values of works by his preferred creators." Eleanor's eyes narrowed as she studied the numbers. The bloody bastard's been running an art world Ponzi scheme. "Not just that," Maya continued, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Remember all those charitable donations to arts organizations? They were laundering operations. He'd donate overvalued artwork, claim massive tax deductions, then use shell companies to buy back the pieces at a fraction of the claimed value." Audrey felt the baby kick forcefully, as if responding to her surge of anger. "How many artists' careers did he destroy?" "Hundreds," Maya whispered, "predominantly women and people of color. He'd identify promising talent, buy up their early works through shell companies, then systematically blacklist them from major galleries. Once their careers were destroyed, he'd reveal their discovered works through his controlled galleries, selling at massive profits." The magnitude of the corruption staggered Audrey. She thought of all the talented artists she'd tried to champion during her curatorial days, how many had mysteriously fallen off the radar despite their brilliance. "We have everything," Eleanor declared, her voice hard with righteous fury. "Bank records, emails, gallery correspondence. The bastard documented his own downfall." Audrey moved to the window, looking out over Brooklyn's sprawling landscape. The city that had seen her fall would now witness her rise, but not just for herself. "Call Patricia," she said finally, turning back to face her allies. "But first, we need to find every artist he destroyed, every career he derailed. They need to know they weren't failures, they were targets." What followed was a week of careful, meticulous planning. Patricia Chen assembled a team of forensic accountants and civil rights attorneys. Eleanor activated her network of ethical art collectors and gallery owners. Maya coordinated with investigative journalists who'd been trying to crack Arlo's facade for years. Then, on a crisp Thursday morning, as Arlo prepared to announce his latest luxury development project, the truth detonated like a bomb in Manhattan's social scene. The New York Times headline read, "Barnaby Empire Exposed, Systematic Discrimination and Art Market Manipulation Revealed." The Wall Street Journal followed, "Barnaby Art Fund, a decade of discrimination and fraud." Art News dropped the final bomb. The Fall of an Empire, How Arlo Barnaby Destroyed Artists to Build His Fortune. Audrey watched the chaos unfold from her warehouse office. One hand pressed against her active baby, the other holding her phone as it exploded with messages from artists around the world. Each story was a piece of a larger pattern. Talent suppressed, dreams crushed, careers destroyed, all to feed one man's greed. The press conference that followed would be remembered as a watershed moment in the art world. Audrey stood at the podium, her pregnant silhouette powerful against the backdrop of the partially renovated warehouse. Cameras flashed as she addressed the world. To every artist who was told they weren't good enough, whose work was deemed unmarketable, who gave up their dreams because the system seemed stacked against them, you weren't wrong. The system was rigged. But today, that system begins to crumble. She gestured to the space around her. This will be more than just another gallery. This will be a sanctuary for authentic artistic expression, a place where talent matters more than connections, where creativity isn't measured by market manipulation, but by its power to move the human spirit. Eleanor stepped forward, her presence commanding respect. The Blackwood Foundation is establishing a $50 million fund to support artists who were victimized by the Barnaby scheme. But more than money, we're offering something they tried to steal: opportunity. Maya unveiled the website they'd been building in secret. Phoenix Rising, Art Beyond Barriers. The platform would connect suppressed artists with ethical galleries, collectors, and opportunities. As Audrey fielded questions from reporters, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She glanced down to see a message that made her blood freeze. "You have no idea what you've started. See." Callista's threat might have once terrified her. Now it only fueled her determination. She looked directly into the nearest camera, knowing they would be watching. "Actually, I know exactly what I've started. A revolution." The baby kicked fiercely, and Audrey smiled, remembering something her mother used to say, "The strongest trees grow in the hardest winds." Later that night, as she sat in her office overlooking the Brooklyn skyline, Audrey wrote in her journal, "Dear little one, today we help truth find its voice. Tomorrow, we'll help others find theirs. Your father built an empire by silencing dreams. We're building one by amplifying them. The art world called me a footnote in Arlo Barnaby's story. They're about to learn I was writing my own all along. Love, Mama." The autumn wind whistled through Brooklyn streets, carrying whispers of change. In Manhattan, Arlo's carefully constructed world was crumbling. But in a transformed warehouse at the heart of Brooklyn, a new world was taking shape. One built not on suppression, but on liberation. The revolution wasn't just beginning, it was rising, phoenix-like, from the ashes of what had tried to destroy it. Chapter 10. The Judgment. When Empires Fall. The December wind howled through Manhattan's concrete canyons like a harbinger of change as Audrey Williams stood before the mirror in Maya's guest room. 9 months pregnant now, she curved her hand protectively over her belly while Maya helped her into a carefully chosen outfit, a deep burgundy maternity dress that spoke of both power and grace. "Ready to watch an empire fall?" Maya asked, adjusting Audrey's collar. Today wasn't just another court date. It was the culmination of months of investigation. The day when all of Arlo Barnaby's carefully constructed lies would come crashing down. The evidence they'd gathered had sparked multiple federal investigations, and now, finally, the civil case that would determine the future of the art world was about to begin. The courthouse steps were a circus of media crews and protesters, signs reading "Art Without Barriers" and "Justice for Silenced Artists" waved above the crowd. Audrey's arrival caused a surge of excitement. Phoenix Rising had been trending for weeks, her story becoming a symbol of resistance against systematic oppression. Eleanor Blackwood waited at the top of the steps, her silver hair gleaming in the winter sun. Behind her stood a line of artists, dozens of them, whose careers Arlo had destroyed. Each face told a story of dreams crushed and hopes rekindled. "The vulture has arrived," Eleanor murmured as a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up. Arlo emerged, his usual confidence notably diminished. His empire was already crumbling, major clients had withdrawn, galleries were distancing themselves, and his stock had plummeted. But it was the absence of Callista that spoke volumes. Inside the courtroom, Judge Maria Rodriguez surveyed the scene before her with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The gallery was packed with art world luminaries, journalists and activists. This wasn't just a legal proceeding, it was a reckoning. Patricia Chen rose, her presence commanding attention. "Your Honor, what we present today isn't just evidence of financial fraud or market manipulation. This is the systematic destruction of artists' lives for profit, a deliberate scheme to maintain power through oppression." The evidence unfolded like a masterfully curated exhibition of corruption. Financial records revealed the intricate web of shell companies Arlo had used to manipulate the art market. Emails exposed his calculated destruction of promising careers. Former employees testified about the explicit instructions to blacklist artists based on race and gender. But it was the artists' testimonies that brought the courtroom to tears. Maria Santos, a brilliant Latina sculptor whose early works now sold for millions, none of which she'd seen, described how Arlo's blacklisting had forced her to abandon her art and work as a janitor. "I thought I wasn't good enough," she said, her voice breaking. "Now I know I was too good to control." James Washington, an African-American painter whose work had been rediscovered after years of manufactured obscurity, revealed how Arlo's manipulation had driven him to the brink of suicide. "He didn't just steal our art," James declared. "He tried to steal our voices." Throughout the testimony, Audrey sat straight-backed, one hand on her belly, feeling her baby respond to each powerful statement. This child would be born into a world of truth, not lies. When Arlo finally took the stand, his trademark arrogance had vanished. Patricia Chen's cross-examination was surgical in its precision. "Mr. Barnaby, can you explain this email from 2019? She displayed the message on the courtroom screen. "Specifically the part where you write, 'These diversity initiatives are bad for business. Handle it like we handled the Williams situation.'" Arlo's face paled. That was taken out of context. "Then let's add context." Patricia smiled like a shark sensing blood. "Your Honor, I present Exhibit 147, Mr. Barnaby's complete correspondence regarding his systematic suppression of minority artists, including his own wife." The evidence was devastating. Emails, recordings, financial records, each piece adding to the portrait of corruption. But it was a video deposition from Callista that delivered the fatal blow. The courtroom screen flickered to life, showing Callista in her lawyer's office, her perfect facade cracking under oath. "Yes, it was all planned," she admitted. Arlo saw Audrey as a threat, a young, talented black woman gaining influence in his world. He ordered me to seduce him, to help destroy her credibility. "It wasn't personal," she added, though her eyes showed a glimmer of shame. "It was business." The courtroom erupted. Arlo's lawyers scrambled for damage control, but the truth was a tsunami that swept away their carefully constructed defenses. Judge Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. In light of this evidence, this court is prepared to rule. The silence that fell was absolute. Audrey felt her baby kick, once, twice, 3 times, as if counting down to destiny. "Arlo Barnaby," the judge began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hushed room, "you have used your wealth and influence not to elevate art, but to corrupt it. Not to support talent, but to suppress it. Not to build culture, but to control it." She lifted a document. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs. Mr. Barnaby, you are hereby ordered to pay $500 million in damages to the affected artists. Furthermore, all galleries and properties involved in this scheme will be placed in a trust, managed by a board of independent artists and cultural leaders, to be transformed into spaces for emerging talent." The judge's gaze swept the courtroom, but money alone cannot repair the damage done to countless careers, to the very integrity of art itself. Therefore, this court also orders the creation of an oversight committee to investigate and prevent similar manipulation in the future. "Ms. Williams," she nodded to Audrey, "your Phoenix Rising initiative will play a key role in this transformation." As the verdict sank in, Audrey felt a sharp pain ripple through her body. Her water broke right there in the courtroom. Maya grabbed her hand. "The baby's coming." Eleanor Blackwood took charge immediately. "Make way, artist and revolutionary in labor." As security cleared a path and Maya called an ambulance, Audrey caught Arlo's eye across the courtroom. He stood alone, his empire in ruins, watching as she was surrounded by a community of support and love. "Ms. Williams," Judge Rodriguez called out as the paramedics arrived, "it seems your revolution is about to welcome its newest member." Hours later, in a private room at Mount Sinai Hospital, Audrey held her daughter for the first time. The baby's eyes, wide and bright, seemed to contain all the possibilities of the future. "Welcome to the world, Hope Williams," she whispered. "You're born into a revolution." Maya, taking photos, wiped away tears. Hope? Perfect name for a revolutionary's daughter. Eleanor Blackwood, who had refused to leave until the baby arrived, smiled from her chair by the window. "The art world will never be the same," she declared. "Neither will he." On the television in the corner, muted news channels showed Arlo being escorted from the courthouse, his face ashen. The ticker beneath read, "Barnaby Empire falls. Art world revolutionary gives birth as verdict delivers justice." Audrey looked down at her daughter, seeing in her tiny face all the strength and resilience of generations of women who had fought for their voices to be heard. "Your story begins where his ends," she whispered, "and it's going to be beautiful." Chapter 11. The Aftermath. A New Dawn. Spring bloomed across Brooklyn like a Renaissance painting, splashing color across the industrial landscape. The transformed warehouse, now the Phoenix Rising Arts Center, stood as a beacon of hope against the morning sky. Inside, 3-month-old Hope Williams cooed softly in her custom-designed nursery, adjacent to Audrey's office, while her mother prepared for what would become a historic day in the art world. "The numbers just came in," Maya announced, bursting into the office with her tablet. "Over 3,000 artists have registered on our platform. The stories they're sharing." Her voice caught with emotion. "Audrey, we've barely scratched the surface of what Arlo did." Audrey lifted hope from her bassinet, drawing strength from her daughter's innocent gaze. The baby's eyes, wise beyond their months, seemed to hold all the promise of their revolution. "Tell me," she said softly, knowing each story needed to be heard. Maya began reading from the testimonials. A Vietnamese sculptor whose entire collection had been bought through shell companies, then locked away until she gave up her career. a black photographer whose groundbreaking series on urban poverty had been systematically removed from galleries, a female indigenous artist whose work had been reinterpreted by male artists favored by Arlo's empire. But here's the beautiful part. Maya's eyes sparkled with triumph. Every single one of them is back, creating again, rising. The Phoenix Rising Arts Center had become more than just a gallery. The sprawling complex now housed studio spaces, educational programs, and a revolutionary digital platform connecting artists directly with ethical collectors. The coffee shop, cheekily named Grounds for Revolution, employed former service workers who'd faced similar discrimination. Eleanor Blackwood swept in, her silver hair immaculate as always, carrying the morning's Financial Times. "The art market is experiencing its biggest transformation in decades," she announced with satisfaction. "Traditional galleries are scrambling to prove their ethical credentials, the Barnaby effect they're calling it." Audrey shifted hope to her other arm, moving to the window that overlooked the center's main gallery. Below, artists worked on installations for their upcoming exhibition, Silenced No More. Each piece told a story of resurrection. "Have you seen this morning's headlines?" Patricia Chen strode in, her legal briefcase bulging with new documents. She spread newspapers across Audrey's desk. "Barnaby Empire continues to crumble, major properties seized for artist trust. Callista breaks silence, full expose on art world manipulation. Phoenix Rising, how one woman's fall sparked a cultural revolution." But it was the smaller story, buried in the arts section, that caught Audrey's eye. Arlo Barnaby spotted in London, allegedly seeking treatment for depression. "He tried to call me," Audrey revealed quietly, bouncing hope as she fussed. "Left a voicemail last night." The room fell silent. Maya stepped closer, protective as always. "What did he say?" Audrey moved to her desk, pressing the speaker button on her phone. Arlo's voice, stripped of its former arrogance, filled the room. "Audrey, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But watching you, watching what you've built from the ashes of what I destroyed, you were right. That first day in the gallery, art endures, truth endures. I never understood that until now." The message ended with a long pause, filled only with the sound of his breathing, as if he had more to say, but couldn't find the words. "Well," Eleanor said dryly, "it seems even devils can recognize their damnation." Hope chose that moment to let out a happy gurgle, reaching for the sunlight streaming through the windows. Audrey kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in her sweet baby scent. "You know what the best revenge is," she mused, "creating something so beautiful, so transformative, that it makes the original harm look small in comparison." As if on cue, the elevator doors opened, revealing Maria Santos, the sculptor who'd been forced to work as a janitor. She wore paint-splattered overalls and a smile that could light up the darkest corners of any gallery. "The youth program students have arrived," she announced. 20 kids from the neighborhoods, all ready to learn that their voices matter." Audrey felt tears prick her eyes as she followed Maria to the education center. The large space buzzed with energy as teenagers from Brooklyn's most underserved communities discovered the power of artistic expression. Their faces shone with the same light she'd once seen in her own reflection, back when art had first claimed her heart. "Ms. Williams?" A young girl with braids like Audrey used to wear raised her hand. "Is it true that you used to serve coffee?" The room hushed, other students looking uncomfortable, but Audrey smiled. "I did. And you know what I learned? Every cup of coffee I served, every moment of humiliation I endured, was teaching me something valuable: how to rise." She shifted hope to her shoulder, addressing the entire room. "Society tries to tell us where we belong, what spaces we're allowed to occupy. But art teaches us that the only boundaries that matter are the ones in our minds." The students absorbed her words like parched earth drinking rain. One boy, his hands covered in clay, asked the question that hung in the air. But what if they try to stop us, like they tried to stop you? Audrey's answer was interrupted by a commotion at the door. James Washington, the painter who'd nearly given up everything, burst in, waving his phone. "The Guggenheim," he exclaimed. "They want to feature the Silence No More exhibition. They're calling it a necessary recalibration of the artistic canon." The room erupted in cheers. Maya was already on her tablet, coordinating logistics. Eleanor began making calls to her network of ethical collectors. Patricia started outlining the legal frameworks needed to protect the artist's rights. But Audrey stood still in the center of the chaos, holding her daughter close, watching the young artists celebrate. This was the real victory, not the headlines, not the fallen empire, but these moments of pure possibility. Later that evening, after the students had gone home and Hope was sleeping peacefully in her nursery, Audrey sat in her office, writing in her journal. "Dear Hope, today I watched young artists discover their power, saw broken dreams begin to heal, and witnessed the birth of something revolutionary. Your father tried to build an empire by crushing others beneath it. We're building one by lifting everyone up. The art world called it the Barnaby effect, how one man's fall exposed decades of corruption. But I prefer to think of it as the Phoenix effect, how from the ashes of destruction something more beautiful can rise. You'll grow up in a world where your voice matters, where your art matters, where you matter. Not because of your name or your connections, but because of your humanity. That's the real masterpiece, my love. Not the paintings on our walls or the sculptures in our galleries, but the change we create in the world. Love, Mama." Chapter 12. Legacy of Love, the Greatest Masterpiece. 5 years had painted seasons of change across Brooklyn's skyline. The Phoenix Rising Arts Center, once a forgotten warehouse, now stood as a gleaming beacon of hope and transformation. Its walls, adorned with stories of resurrection, had become a pilgrimage site for artists and dreamers from around the world. On this particular autumn morning, much like the one when she'd first met Arlo, Audrey Williams stood in the center's main gallery, surrounded by the fruits of revolution. But this time, she wasn't alone. 5-year-old Hope skipped beside her, her curls bouncing with each step, her small hand pointing at various artworks with the confidence of someone born into a world of creativity. "Mama, look!" Hope's voice echoed through the gallery. "Ms. Maria's new sculpture is like a dancing flame." Audrey smiled, watching her daughter's eyes light up with the pure joy of artistic discovery. Hope had grown into a remarkable child, fierce, compassionate, and wise beyond her years. She was their revolution personified, a living testament to the power of rising from ashes. The gallery hummed with activity as final preparations were made for their 5th anniversary celebration. The event would mark not just the success of Phoenix Rising, but a fundamental transformation in the art world itself. The walls showcased works from over 1,000 artists whose voices had once been silenced, each piece a story of triumph over adversity. Maya burst through the doors, tablet in hand as always. "The numbers are in," she announced, her smile radiant. "The Phoenix Rising Foundation has provided grants to over 5,000 artists worldwide. The mentorship program has a 100% success rate in career placement. And," she paused dramatically, "Time magazine just confirmed you're their Person of the Year." Audrey shook her head, still uncomfortable with personal acclaim. "The movement is what matters, not me." "Speaking of the movement," Eleanor Blackwood's familiar voice rang out as she entered, "wait until you see who's here." Through the doors streamed faces that brought tears to Audrey's eyes. Maria Santos, now a celebrated sculptor whose works commanded 6-figure sums, all of which she donated to arts education. James Washington, whose paintings of resilience had become symbols of the movement. Young artists from their first youth program, now successful. Creators in their own right, but it was the final visitor who stopped Audrey's heart. Gloria Williams, Audrey's mother, walked in slowly, leaning on Marcus Williams's arm. Their relationship had taken years to heal after Audrey's initial refusal to return home, but time and truth had bridged the gap. "Baby girl," Gloria whispered, opening her arms. Audrey moved into her mother's embrace, feeling years of pain and pride flow between them. Hope rushed to join the hug, completing their circle of healing. "I was wrong," Gloria said softly, "when I warned you about dreaming too big. Look what you've built from broken dreams." The moment was interrupted by Patricia Chen's arrival. "Sorry to break this up, but there's something you need to see." She handed Audrey a letter, the return address from a rehabilitation center in Switzerland. Audrey recognized the handwriting immediately, Arlo's. With trembling fingers, she opened it. "Dear Audrey, time grants perspective that pride denies. 5 years ago you stood in our courtroom and spoke of revolution. I thought you naive. I was the fool. Yesterday I visited the Louvre's new wing, the one dedicated to artists resurrected by Phoenix Rising. I saw Maria Santos's sculpture, the one you fought for when we first met. It brought me to my knees. You were right, that first day in the gallery. Art endures, truth endures, love endures. I don't ask forgiveness, I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that the trust fund I've established will provide permanent funding for Phoenix Rising's programs. It's not redemption, but perhaps it's a step toward healing. Hope deserves to know that her mother changed the world, that she turned one man's cruelty into a revolution of kindness. With profound respect and eternal regret, Arlo." Silence fell as Audrey finished reading. Hope tugged at her hand, her young face serious. "Mama, is that from my father?" Audrey knelt before her daughter, seeing in her eyes all the wisdom of generations. "Yes, baby. He finally learned what true art means." "Like you taught me," Hope nodded solemnly, "that real art comes from love, not power." The gallery erupted in movement as final preparations continued for the evening's celebration. Artists hung works, caterers arranged displays, and journalists set up equipment. But Audrey stood still, holding her daughter close, watching their community in action. Maya approached with tears in her eyes. "Ready for your speech?" Audrey smiled, remembering a different time, a different gallery, a different woman. "I think I finally know what to say." That evening, as the sun set over Brooklyn, casting golden light through the gallery's windows, Audrey stood before a crowd of hundreds. Artists, collectors, students and dreamers, all part of the revolution she'd sparked from the ashes of her pain. Hope sat in the front row between Gloria and Eleanor, her small face beaming with pride. Behind her, rows of young artists from their programs clutched portfolios containing their dreams. Audrey took a deep breath and began. 5 years ago, I stood in a Starbucks, wearing an apron, carrying a child, and burning with shame. A man who'd promised to love me instead tried to destroy me. He thought he was writing my ending. He didn't realize he was opening my first chapter. This center isn't just about art. It's about every person who's ever been told their voice doesn't matter, every dream that's been dismissed as too ambitious, every heart that's been broken by those who mistake power for strength. Look around you. See the works on these walls? Each one is a victory, not just over discrimination or manipulation, but over the voice inside that whispers, "Give up." To the young artists here tonight, your voice matters. Your vision matters. Your truth matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. To those who tried to silence us, thank you. Your walls became our canvases. Your barriers became our bridges. Your rejection became our revolution. And to my daughter, Hope, you are the masterpiece I'm most proud of. You were born into a storm, but you became our rainbow. Every day you remind me why we fight. why we create, why we rise. Art isn't just about beauty, it's about truth. And the truth is, we are all artists of our own destiny. Every setback is a blank canvas. Every tear is a color on our palette. Every moment of pain is an opportunity to create something beautiful. This is not the end of our revolution. It's just the first brushstroke. As applause filled the gallery, Hope ran to her mother, wrapping small arms around her waist. Audrey lifted her daughter, seeing in her face all the promise of tomorrow. Above them, through the skylight, stars twinkled like distant dreams waiting to be reached. The same stars that had witnessed her fall now bore testimony to her rise. In that moment, surrounded by art and love and possibility, Audrey Williams finally understood. Sometimes, the greatest masterpieces aren't hung on walls or displayed in museums. Sometimes they're written in the chapters of our lives, painted with tears and triumph, sculpted by resilience and love. And sometimes, the most beautiful art of all is the simple act of rising again and again until we touch the stars that once seemed out of reach. Rising from the ashes, a message of hope and empowerment. Dear sisters, this story isn't just about Audrey, it's about every woman who has ever looked in the mirror and wondered if her best years are behind her. It's for every heart that's been broken, every dream that's been shattered, and every spirit that refuses to be crushed. Your age is your power. Being over 30 isn't your weakness. It's your strength. You carry wisdom that only experience can teach, resilience that only challenges can build, and a depth that only time can create. When Audrey faced betrayal at 20, she had youth but lacked experience. You have both your strength and your story. Betrayal is not your ending. When someone breaks your trust, they don't break your worth. They reveal their character, not your value. Remember, every tear you shed waters the seeds of your rebirth. Every moment of pain becomes fuel for your transformation. Every betrayal is an opportunity to reclaim your narrative. Your story is still being written. Divorce isn't a period at the end of your story, it's a semicolon, a pause before your next chapter begins. Society might try to tell you that starting over is harder after 30, but here's the truth. You know yourself better now than ever before. You understand what you truly want and deserve. You have the wisdom to build something sustainable. Your experiences have equipped you with invaluable insights. Nadraj, turn pain into power. Like Audrey transformed her humiliation into a revolution, you can transform your pain into purpose. Use your experiences to help others. Channel your hurt into creativity. Transform your challenges into expertise. Build something beautiful from the ashes of what was lost. Your greatest masterpiece is you remember that success isn't measured by society's standards, but by your own growth. Every small step forward is a victory. Every day you choose to rise is an achievement. Every moment you choose yourself is a triumph. A new definition of love. Learn to love yourself with the same passion you once gave to someone else. Invest in your dreams the way you invested in theirs. Believe in your potential the way you believed in their promises. Trust your intuition the way you trusted their words. Build your phoenix, rising. Your rebirth might not look like Audrey's. You might not build an art center or become a public figure, but you can. Create a new career that aligns with your authentic self. Build a community of supportive, like-minded women. Develop your passions and interests. Foster meaningful relationships based on mutual respect. Create a life that makes you proud. Remember, 1, your age is a crown, not a cage. 2, your experience is an asset, not a liability. 3, your past is a lesson, not a life sentence. 4, your heart can heal and love again. Your future is limitless. Your revolution starts now. Whether you're healing from betrayal, navigating divorce, rebuilding your career, rediscovering your identity, starting a new chapter, know this: you are not alone. You are not broken. You are not finished. Like Audrey, you can turn your pain into purpose, your challenges into chances, and your breakdown into a breakthrough. Your age isn't your expiration date, it's your elevation point. The world tries to tell women over 30 that their best days are behind them. Prove them wrong. Show them that your best days are the ones you choose to create, regardless of your age, your past, or your pain. Remember Audrey's words: sometimes the greatest masterpieces aren't hung on walls or displayed in museums. Sometimes they're written in the chapters of our lives, painted with tears and triumph, sculpted by resilience and love. Your masterpiece is still being created. Your revolution is still unfolding. Your phoenix is still rising. With love and solidarity, a fellow rising phoenix. P.S. The next time someone tries to make you feel small because of your age, your past, or your pain, remember this: phoenixes don't ask permission to rise. They simply spread their wings and soar. Subscribe if you liked.